Get ready for the Rockin' Hockey Show.
My name is EJ. I'm from Boca Raton, Florida. This is my first time on an outdoor hockey rink, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
Get them sticks down and get the pucks to the net. This is Keith Robert War, and you're watching Rockin' Hockey.
Hunter McDonald with the Northeastern Huskies, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
Hey, everybody, this is Stoney Curtis from the Stoney Curtis Band and Count 77, and you are watching the Rockin' Hockey Show.
I'm Hannah, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
Hey guys, I'm Claudia Heuser, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
I'm Blake Humphrey from Sacred Heart, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is Jeff Tortora, Blue Man Group, Femmes of Rock, Count 77. This is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
I'm Finn, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
Hey everybody, I'm Nina D from the Femmes of Rock, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is Kiara Zan, and I play on Penn State, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is hockey, the way it should be. Welcome to the Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
The Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is Deal Hockey, and you're watching the Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is the Rockin' Hockey Show. It's the Rockin' Hockey Show.
Welcome to the Rockin' Hockey Show, where our host wishes it was OBR season all year long, Coach Dave Mack.
Welcome, Rockers and Hockers, to the Rockin' Hockey Show. This is the show where the hockey rocks and the music kicks. If you're new here, do not forget, you gotta like, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, and tune into the podcast on all podcast platforms. Make sure to give that Gordie Howe elbow right to that subscribe button. I'm Wesley James, and this is the show where great hockey content and great music come out. So you're all thinking, new merch. Got the Rockin' Hockey jersey, got a new hat, got it in white too, or the trucker hat. Yes, we've got it in black too. And this one in gray. You can get this merch for yourself at Etsy.com at The Rockin' Hockey Show. Thank you for tuning in to the last show. We had Scott Gergen from IceHockeySystems.com. And for this show, we've got Gates Orlando, longtime pro and NHL scout coming in. As always, we've got great skill development, funny skits, and great rock and roll music. And they have the band. Remember, this is the show where the hockey rocks.
Fleming shoots and scores! Max Fleming!
And the music sucks. Now take it away, Lord Stanley's brother.
Today's interview brought to you by Trotta. Check them out at TrottaRochester.com. All right, welcome to the Rockin' Hockey Show, and with us live from Minnesota, we have longtime pro hockey player, now NHL scout, Gates Orlando. Gates, how are you, man?
I'm good, David. How are you? RJ, what's up?
Doing well, sir. Doing well. Been a long time since I've seen you. Great to see you. And I was thinking about all your hockey. Do you ever get sick of hockey? Because you had 17 years of pro hockey. Now you've been scouting for, is it over 20 years now? Or
yeah, it's been over 20 years involved in terms of coaching and scouting. Yeah, so it's been a long time. I basically haven't really worked a day in my life.
Do you wake up and say, I want to do something else other than hockey, or is it just kind of, it's not really work for you, it's more fun?
No, I mean, there's days that the travel is tough. It gets tedious, but in terms of watching and the challenge of finding and recruiting players is always exciting. So it doesn't get old.
Awesome. So let's talk just real briefly before we get off on tangents. Talk about your career. Wow, what an amazing career you had. 17 years of pro hockey. You played over 100 games in NHL. You played in Switzerland. You played in Italy. You played here for the Rochester Amherst. Just a great career. How much fun did you have playing pro hockey?
Well, I grew up in Canada, and obviously every Canadian kid's dream is to play at a higher level, NHL being the ultimate. So I was very fortunate to have some great parents in terms of, supporting, and I ended up doing a lot of things based on, my will to get to the point that I wanted to get to. So I was very fortunate. I played youth hockey in Canada, and I got a scholarship to go to play at Providence College. And under the mentorship of Lou Lamoriello, I became a better player in person. So that evolved, obviously, to getting drafted by the Sabres. I played in Rochester at the beginning, and then Buffalo. I had a little stint there, and then after that, I decided to, I wanted to stay in the NHL, but I wasn't going to get a chance in Buffalo, so I decided to maybe go to Europe and come back with another team, and I ended up going to Europe and stayed there for 12 years. So it was a great career. I had a lot of fun doing it. I saw lots of the world, so I can't look back and say I wish I would have stayed, because my career was fulfilling.
Well, that's awesome. And I always tell people that was one of my goals. When I realized I was probably not going to be good enough to make it to the NHL, I wanted to go play in Europe. And, back in that day, as you can attest to, it was difficult to get over there. It's not like it is nowadays where, there's a lot more avenues for players to go to Europe. Back then, I always tell the story, I had to go to the post office and send a telegram to this team in London, and I don't even know if they ever even received it, because they never responded to me. But that was how I tried to get to Europe, was I was sending a telegram to a team, and I don't even know if they ever received it. Nowadays, you can just go online or talk to people, message them instantly, and you know whether they're listening or not. But playing in Europe was something I always wanted to do. But back to your career. It fits in perfectly with our conversation that we're going to get into a little bit. Now, you were a very skilled player, fast and speedy, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But I did notice one year, I don't know if it was an anomaly, but you always had great points. One year you had 144 points, which was almost twice as much as your normal average. What happened that year that made that such a staggering year for you?
I think that was maybe my second year in Italy, and I mean, the level of hockey was not the highest, and top two lines on every team were competitive, and then after that, the depth wasn't great. So there were nights when you played against lower teams and you were end up getting 4 or 5 points a night. So I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate to play with some really good players over there as well. So when I first went to Italy, people thought it was kind of a joke, but then you look at some of these rosters, ex-NHL players that played there. If you go through the list of players that played in Italy, it's pretty impressive. The Yari Currys and the Kent Nilssons, Yager played over there. There's some good players. So, but most of the teams weren't stacked in terms of the depth. So when you played those lower level teams, you had it was make hay when the sun's shining, as they say.
Well, listen, you just said a name that we were just talking about, because as I was prepping for this show yesterday, I was thinking about the skill of players nowadays and the skill of players back in the 70s and 80s. And the name that popped in my head was Kent Nilsson, and you just said his name. Did you know him or play with him?
Played against him my first year over there, and I think I had 144. He might have had 500. I don't know what he had, but I think there was a story out there that he had a bonus for goals, and I think by the 5th game they just decided to pay him.
But we were talking about, one of the things we were talking about is like that time when you were in Europe, a lot of the skilled players were coming over from Europe because the NHL were still in their grind. They're bigger. They wanted bigger guys. They wanted some fighters out there on the ice at all times. They wanted guys who would lay hits. It hadn't been yet your Russian invasion with your Fedorovs and your Yzermans and all that. So like a lot of the skilled guys in the 80s did come from Europe to play in the NHL. So
yeah, I mean the European game is predicated on skill. They've made a lot of adjustments in terms of their ice surfaces now. They're trying to become a little bit smaller and maybe a little bit more North American, because they realize a lot of their kids that their aspirations are to go play in North America. But in those days, they all had Olympic-sized rinks, and it was almost impossible to hit anybody because there's lots of room behind the net. There's lots of rooms in the corner, so it was more of a skill game. So that's where the guys, obviously, they played that way. And when they came to North America, and the guys that had the extreme level of skill were able to survive, whereas the guys that were marginal in that sense couldn't compete with the grit and with the heavy stuff. So as you're seeing now, obviously the level of skill in North America has increased dramatically.
Well, a lot of that is guys like Dave learning,
absolutely,
taking European methods and bringing them over and adapting them, kind of, like bringing them in and making them their own. Maybe not copying, maybe not doing exactly the same, but putting a little twist on it. Dave, and we have another couple good instructors with us. So,
well, believe it or not, Gates, I've been doing skill stuff for over 30 years now. Isn't that crazy?
I remember when you first came to Rochester, Dave, and you were ahead of the curve. I mean, you implemented not only the on ice stuff that you were doing, but some of this stuff off the ice.
Right. Go ahead.
And the off ice stuff is something that I think that these kids now, they don't know what we did, what we had to go through in a sense, because we didn't know any better.
Right.
And some of these techniques and some of these drills they're doing off the ice is really conducive to them performing on the ice.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference in terms of, that's why you're seeing more of these players, the faster, stronger kids.
Yeah. I mean, being around the rink for almost 30 years now, like the difference between how it was when, like, we were talking off the air, was how your son was when he started when he was playing at Victor Hockey. It was, you show up at the rink, okay, we'll have one lift day at school. Now it's, you got to practice 4 days a week. You better be lifting or doing something 4 days a week. There's programs and everything's lined up to the point where we even have a fitness facility on our campus now. So it's like you don't even have to leave the facility, and you're going to get your off ice stuff done right there. So it's insane how it's changed.
Yeah, and not only that, it's like you mentioned, like one workout, but now these workouts are specific. I mean, they're working on body parts, muscle parts that are going to make the player more explosive, make the player stronger in certain areas. I mean, you've all seen, or I think you've seen the 1965 Chicago Blackhawks training camp invite. We had to do 12 push-ups. And nowadays, like, you think about it, when we've played and when I played, used to go to camp, it was like 6 weeks. Now the camps are 3 days. These NHL players are fit. They're ready to go. So they put the time in the summertime. They do the work, and they're physically ready and capable of performing at the highest levels.
Well, it is. I know we kind of morphed right into that conversation, but I still do lessons, Gates, and it's amazing. I still have to convince people that off-ice training is not just optional or something that you can do. It's mandatory if you want to be a higher level player. It doesn't matter what level. If you're aspire to play AA hockey from house or a AAA from AA, you have to do that stuff because it's mandatory. And like you said, the leg strength stuff, the explosive movements, and that add to not only your skating skills, but your ability to shoot the puck, your ability to stay on your feet, your ability to make plays in the corner, things like that. And here 30 years later, I'm still having to convince people that this is something they really need to do. And it's funny that as much as the game has evolved. So,
well, I'm glad that you're still instilling in these kids, because without it, there's no chance that they can play.
Yeah. And I remember back when I first started doing this, and I was sitting there thinking, how can I make players better? And off-ice training came to mind. And I did some at college. It was minimal, but I started thinking, I'm like, how can I take what I'm doing off-ice and implement it on ice? And I started doing that into my power skating stuff with jumping and the plyometric stuff. And, I started doing that, 20 years before anybody else really started doing it. And it's been, I still teach it with a lot of one-leg explosives things. And it's just funny how it's come full circle, but I still, again, getting people to believe in it. And it's go ahead. I could talk about it for hours, but
no, I think you're right on. And I think when you talk about the plyometric stuff, and obviously that became, that started in Europe somewhere, or Eastern Europeans, the Russians were very knowledgeable in that area. And I think one of the areas, especially in the United States, I'm not so much sure about Canada, but the United States, a lot of the hockey players in the old days, they were training, but they were training the wrong way. I think they were training more like in a football style.
Right.
You know? And if you see something like, I remember when I first went to a pro training camp, and this was years and years ago, we didn't have a bench press. You know, it was not really conducive to hockey movements.
Right.
Whereas if you go into a football training room, you see guys pushing out 400, 500 pounds, totally different muscles being used. So I think we discovered, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because you said, you know what, we got to change our mentality in terms of how we prepare to go on the ice. Because if we don't change the way we train, we're going to be the same players.
Right. Well, let's transition just a little bit. And I know the conversation has kind of been right around that, but the skill of players nowadays that you're seeing, not only at the NHL level, but at the college level and the junior level, the players that you're recruiting down to youth hockey, just the amazing skill that they have compared to back when you played. How much difference is? I mean, just with the puck stuff, you think about guys like Kent Nilsson, and I never got to see you play, but I've heard many great things about how good you were. And a funny story, Gates, is every ex-Amherst I talk to nowadays, when I talk about their career, they bring up your name as being a great player that they were able to play with. So hats off to you on having a great career and in playing a skill game back when it wasn't really a skill game, back in the 70s and 80s, where you were a skilled player. So give us your thoughts on today's player versus yesterday's player, and then we'll talk about it back down to youth hockey.
All right, I'm going to go back what you said, and if you look at my stats, they were actually pretty good. But if you look at my penalty minutes, they were actually pretty up there too. And I'll tell you why that helped, because in those days you had to defend yourself, and you had to prove that you weren't going to be bullied. For a smaller guy, you weren't going to get pushed around. Now, today's game, the skill level is insane. Some of the kids, with the stuff that they do, and it starts with the skating. Like, I never did a mohawk, whatever, to 10-2. I don't know how to do that stuff. The edge work on some of these kids now is outrageous. Their speed, their power, their strength. It all starts with skating. And then you implement some of the stick handling stuff, some of the skills. And that, to me, is two-part. One, obviously, is there's new techniques, there's new innovations. Secondly, it's the equipment. You talk about guys shooting the puck nowadays. I remember when I was playing juniors back in Montreal, I'd try and, from a standstill, try and lift the puck from the goal line to the red line. It was not even close. These kids are firing the puck over the glass at the far end now.
Yeah, it's
so that helps. But also, like I said, everything combined, the training, the equipment, the knowledge, the skill level. If you give the superior athletes of my era the same opportunities, they'd be dominant players as well.
That comes up all the time when somebody says something like that, whether it's Gretzky or Babe Ruth or Michael Jordan, those three. Like, could they compete now? And then because they had the drive, and they would just they would be different people. They would train harder. I mean, like we were talking about the weightlifting and all the skill stuff. Basketball didn't do that until Jordan started doing that stuff. And that's exactly what you're saying with these guys. Like Gretzky, you can imagine him playing here where somebody can't grab him like they used to in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, the skills alone, it's insane.
And Gretzky wouldn't be the same player in the league now because he's 65 years old. But I'm just saying. but he probably could still play.
Yeah.
If you give him some time to get in shape, I mean, obviously it wouldn't be the age factor, but any superior athlete given the same conditions would have dominated in today's game.
Crazy. Do you look back and think about how good your career was, but what if you were to play in today's game, obviously still being young, how successful do you think you might have been? Have you
I don't try and go back and think about it, but I've been told, by my friends and ex-teammates that I would have been, this would have been my era.
Right.
In terms of the type of players that are playing nowadays. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of guys that played before me and played after me that never really got the chance because of their size. But the game obviously now is size is not as important, but it's still a man's game.
Right. Yeah.
If you understand what I mean. I mean, you look at some of the teams that won cups. I mean, big players, you have to have a special skill set to be that elite, special small player, but it's still a man's game.
So let's relate this back to youth hockey now, Gates. And I had some interesting conversations with Barry Smith, legendary coach Barry Smith, 7 Stanley Cups. He had some great insight on skill development these days. And he didn't say that there was an issue with it, but when it comes to youth hockey and being a skill guy for over 30 years now, I kind of agree with him that the kids are so consumed with skill stuff now that their skating isn't as good as it should be, and their thinking the game isn't as good as it should be because they're so caught up on what they're doing with the puck. I don't know if you have any insight on that one or an opinion on that.
Well, Barry Smith was one of the most innovative guys that I've known, and that he coached me in several places. Actually, it was in Buffalo when I first played in Buffalo. Scotty brought him over. I think he was in Norway or Sweden.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
Yeah. And then obviously he's had a hell of a career, long career, and he knows his stuff. So I would have to agree that the skill is, I mean, obviously, it's today's world. And you look at some of the stuff and all you're seeing on television and on YouTube and these social media sites is these kids doing the Michigan.
Right. Yeah.
And they all want to do the Michigan. Well, that's fine and dandy, but it doesn't really translate to winning hockey games. So getting back to your point, I think the skill development is maybe overemphasized. The other aspects of the game, I think the players seem to neglect, and not only the players, sometimes the coaches as well. On ice awareness, grit, accountability, body positioning, all that stuff. So, for example, I'll give you a perfect example, and I don't know how you think about it, but the other night you saw the hit Reeves hit Nurse.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously they're trying to make the game a little bit safer, and I get that, and I understand, and I agree with it. However, you have a player on a team whose job is to be physical. That's his sole role, is to be a physical presence, and I don't care what you guys say or what anybody says, that's still part of the game.
Right.
They're trying to maybe tone it down a bit, but it's still part of the game. So what I'm seeing now is these kids aren't being taught. Okay, first you have to recognize the situation. Then you have to realize when you get to a certain stage in your careers or in your development, you know who you're playing against. So the onus right now is on the guy doing the hitting. Whereas in the old days, it was, I better know who's on the ice against me, because if I'm on the ice and this guy's going to run me, I better be prepared.
Yeah,
these kids aren't these kids aren't prepared anymore.
Well, it's like the old, it's the Kevin Stevens Paul Korea hit. No penalty. Now, Stevens was borderline on a lot of his hits, but
For sure.
but that Reeves hit. Now, Dave will admit being on the ice all the time, he doesn't get to see a lot of hockey. It was one of those ones where know the situation. He had his head down. Now, was his intent to do what happened? No. And like you're saying, they're trying to ride that, get more mainstream, because to keep players and get players and all that stuff, you got to be able to get on TV nowadays. And they're also try to fans like us who want to see those big hits. So it's one of those things where it's very difficult for the NHL and on both sides, I think, to kind of figure out what they're trying to do.
And I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think these coaches have to start teaching these kids, when you get to bantam age, when they start hitting, that you're going to get hit.
Yeah, pick your head up.
And you need to figure out when to move the puck, how to move the puck, where to put your body, understand who's on the ice. All these little intricacies are basically overlooked because all they're thinking about is skill.
Yeah, I have so many things going through my head right now. So, every day when I teach skill stuff, I actually teach more underhandling the puck than actually handling the puck. And it's constant reminders. Stop stick handling the puck, because it does take brain power to stick handle. And when you're using that much brain power, there's less brain power to be making decisions and being aware of where you're at and what you're doing and stuff like that. So I do want to go back to what you said, Gates, and have you talk a little bit more. You said the onus is more on the player hitting, where it used to be on the player getting and about getting hit. And I know I talk to like my boys a lot is know who's on the ice so that you know how to react and what to do. So like being a forward, when I line up for a face-off, I would know one is who I'm facing off against, so I know how to possibly beat them. But also, I would always look at the defenseman. Who am I going against? Can this guy skate or is this guy not skating? And when I get the puck, I would go to that side that I know that player was weaker than the other player. So just being aware of strengths and weaknesses on the ice. But I want you to go back a little bit more about the onus being on the player hitting now and kind of based on what I just said there.
Yeah, so, obviously the game is physical, and it's always going to be physical. I think, obviously, they're trying to curb the fighting, which I'm agreeing with the stage fights. They shouldn't have the stage fights, but fighting is part of hockey. I think the policing has to be done on the ice. You got to hold guys accountable. If you're out there trying to run guys and cheap shot guys, well, guess what? Karma, it's going to come back. So I'll give you an example. Again, the onus on the guy. So I was at a game recently, and I was sitting there, scouting, and there's some other scouts, and the guy makes a pass. Defenseman makes a pass to his winger. Okay. The other defense comes down, and all three scouts at the same time go, "Ooh!" So we figured there's going to be a big hit. Okay, put the defenseman passed the puck to his teammate, put him in a bad spot. But not only did he put him in a bad spot, the guy put himself in a bad spot.
Right.
So that's twofold. The guy coming in doesn't hit him because he's trying to steal the puck.
Right. Yeah.
So this is the difference. In the old days, if that was Scott Stevens, the guy would have been 4 rows up in the stands.
Yeah.
First of all, the pass wouldn't have been made. Secondly, the guy receiving the pass would have braced himself for the hit. So here we are watching this game, and there's 3 scouts. All of us say, "Ooh." The guy who made the pass had no clue that the guy might have gotten hit. The guy receiving the pass had no inclination to protect himself, and the guy that was supposed to make the hit didn't make the hit. So here's
check marks. I got all 3 of those guys, right?
So here's 3 players in one situation that had very little awareness. And I think, and this is going to be maybe a little bit harsh, but I think these players now are being trained and coached to be robotic. They don't think as well as they used to. Now, the game is faster, so you're telling me, well, they make plays, yes, for sure, because that's the skill coming in. But the actual thinking the game, I believe that it's been dummied down, if you want to say.
Interesting. That's and do you think that's because of the skill, the focus on skill and speed that's happened, or what do you think about why it's been dummied down?
I think part of it is the players, like you said, they want to be the skill guys. I think also sometimes in the youth ages from really young kids, I don't know, 12, 13, I think some of this has to lie on the shoulders of coaches.
Right. That's where I was going to, like, when you got there, and I was going to probably say the same thing, was I watched some of these practices, and Dave and a couple of our other instructors, these travel teams have skills nights. And so the team comes on a Monday and they do skills, but then they practice 2 other times in the week. And I'll go out there and I'll be watching. They're just doing the skills nights again at their practices, basically. And they're just being repetitive. And they're not doing, like you're saying, situational drills. Everything is the same drill, repetitive, or the same skill set. And some kids don't have those skill sets, and some kids are thinkers on the ice, and you need those guys.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I also say, the game of hockey obviously and the coaching has tremendously improved. I mean, the video, Roger Nielsen was way ahead of his time in that respect, but video, you can break down games. So coaching has really, really improved. And I think sometimes like the youth coaches, they want to coach, yes, but then sometimes systems break down. You have to allow your players to be creative and solve problems on their own.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So problems will arise. And I think right now, for example, if you have a practice, your breakout is up the boards, up the boards, up the boards, and keep the puck out of the middle. It's taboo to put the puck up the middle. Well, all these coaches are doing this, and then you have other coaches knowing that, well, they're going to break up the boards, so let's take the boards away. Well, what's open?
The middle.
The middle. Yeah.
Middle. But the players have never been taught to move the puck up the middle of the ice because it's taboo. It's a turnover, it's a goal against. Well, again, if you come around the net and you see that the middle of the ice is open, well, that's where the puck should go. And players don't actively think that way anymore. They're programmed to think a certain way.
Well, I got so many thoughts going through my head right now. I want to go back to Barry Smith again, and his thoughts on that is, and this is not a knock against youth coaches because most of them are volunteers, but they do, the way they run practices, the players become robotic. Like you mentioned, they're not thinking, they just do what they're told, and it's very simple instead of creative, and they're not forced to make choices. So Barry's thing was, every drill you do, the player has to make some sort of a choice or a react off a situation instead of just doing, like, starting with the puck on your stick, skating in a straight line and taking a shot, which, never happens in a game. Do you start with the puck on your stick? Do you just enter the offensive zone uncontested and take a shot on goal? That never happens. So, his big thing was, youth coaches need to challenge players on how to read situations, how to react, how to incorporate, a second player and a third player into their situation. So I thought that was a great way to think. Unfortunately, that's a tough way to coach too, because now you have to really put some thought into your drill. So what are your thoughts on that one?
I think again, I said, and I've known Barry, and Barry is very innovative, and he thinks the game is a different way, and I agree with Barry. But here's the teaching points, though, is when you do these drills, and then you're trying to implement certain things, so like how to react and stuff, you need to be able to figure out, okay, here's what I want to teach, and then you teach it. And if it doesn't work out, you got to stop that drill right then and there and teach the kids, this is what we got to do here. This is not the right way. This is the wrong way. This is the right way. And then obviously situations arise where there's different things, and that the creativity of a player is shunted right now. I believe that the game, because of the speed, sometimes they don't have time to think, but you're not allowing them to think either.
Almost like overcoaching is what is like there's guys that we have a conference room where they do film. Without naming names, there's some very young teams up there doing film work instead of just letting those kids get on the ice, learn it themselves, and also maybe be creative and have fun. Like they're 9, 10 years old. Maybe having fun on a play one time where you all of a sudden make a move and do something, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I could get the confidence and I could do that more often. Sometimes you're a coach.
Again, coaching is a serious aspect of a player's development as well. And there's great coaches, there's mediocre coaches, and there's poor coaches. And like you, Dave, and I'm not bashing coaches, and especially because you said they're mostly volunteers and dads and moms and whatever. But I think that there's certain levels of coaching now that have to be scrutinized at a certain age level. I think that if you get to a certain age level, certain coaches have to be able to implement and teach certain things. At a higher level.
Absolutely. And I want to touch on something you said about stopping a drill and teaching it the right way. In my 30 plus years of doing this, I find that I correct more bad habits because of that than I do actually teach new things and innovative ways to do things, as I'm correcting bad habits. And I see it over and over again. A coach will run a drill and every player will get 6 or 7 reps of doing it. But out of those 6 and 7 reps, 5 of the 6 are bad and they're wrong. And what do you think that player is going to take into a game? He's going to take those mistakes that he made that weren't corrected, and that's what's going to happen in a game because he just did it wrong 5 times instead of getting it, stopping it, and getting it right. So
again, it's like you said, it's going to take a lot of patience for some of these coaches because these practices may do 2 drills.
Yep.
But until you start doing things right, and then you're going to repeat the same errors.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of that, especially with not only with skill but with coaching too. I do have an interesting comment I want to make, and you'll get a kick out of this one, Gates. Is I was talking with a student the other day, and this is a young student, and he was told, do not use your backhand or you'll get benched because you're not good at it and you're going to probably make a mistake. Don't use your backhand or you're going to get benched. This was, I think, an 11-year-old kid was told by his coach to never use his backhand because he's not good at it.
Again, and to my point, at a certain age, you have to learn how to develop other skills. And I know a 5-year-old kid, I'm not going to tell him he's got to make a backhand pass. But when you get to a certain level and the game is becoming how can I say this? But it's becoming more competitive and more serious. You have to implement other skills. So whoever that coach is, I would think, tell your kid he can make a backhand pass.
And just deal with the fact if he's going to make a mistake, he's got to learn how to use it and when to use it. Like, maybe don't use your backhand up the middle in our own zone, but when a situation presents itself, is you got to use it.
And what frustrates me about that is that actually borderlines on one of the things that you and I constantly talk about is confidence. And if this kid,
nice segue, that's what's coming up next,
doesn't try his backhand in practices or games, he's never going to get confident enough to do it. And it brought the reason why I was thinking about that. It was something Gates said earlier was the whole Michigan thing, and obviously, and the confidence thing is Trevor Zegras. Like if you look at him right now, people know him from doing all these great skill moves. You watch him on the bench. He scored a goal the other day. He looked like he was shocked that he scored it. And he looks like he almost doesn't want to be where he is right now. And just his body language and it looks like right now he's struggling with his confidence and everything like that. And it's one of those things where Dave and I always talk about, how do you get there and how do you, like some of the players you may be talking to or scouting, or do you look for that on the ice too? That kind of stuff.
Well, I think the better players are usually the more confident ones. And it's not ironically that they do go hand in hand. I think as a coach, his responsibility is to encourage kids to do certain things where they get that confidence and that confidence grows. Any player who plays on the, how can I say this, on the tentative side won't be successful. You have to have grit. You have to have compete. And that's the other thing, and we define grit and compete. And I think that even that definition has changed.
Yeah.
That's changed quite a bit, and in our organization, we paramount compete. Unfortunately, nowadays, a lot of these kids, you want to bottle certain players, but you can't because you're going to only get a certain part of them, right?
Right.
And I go back to saying a lot of the stuff these kids are seeing is on YouTube, social media, and whatever, TikTok, whatever they're seeing these highlights, and it's basically skill stuff.
So back to the confidence thing, Gates. We like RJ mentioned, we talk about this on almost every show. As a player, and you talk about grit and compete, but again, you have to be confident to go and battle with somebody and compete with them. In your career, did you have any confidence issues, and how did you deal with them so that people listening to this and say, you know what, that's what I got to do? Because I try to give people advice on how to deal with confidence, and it's hard. You can say, oh, you got to feel good about what you're doing, but it's not easy to feel good about what you're doing.
Well, one of the things that these players have now, they do have the ability to seek out mental training. In the old days, there was no such thing. The confidence came either you played well or you didn't. And everybody, I would think, at some point in their career has some confidence issues. You're not playing well, you're in a slump, and team's not going well, you're not going well, but at the end of the day, when you get to a certain level, you have to believe that you've gotten there because you're a good player. And one of the things I used to do when I was, even at my age, I was like almost 33 at the time I retired. I think I was 36. I would sit in my stall and I would tell myself repeatedly, I'm a good player. I'm a good player. And you have to believe that where you've gotten to and what you've done is not by accident.
Right.
And you get there by listening, by watching. If you're fortunate enough, like myself, to have played with some great leaders, you watch what they do on the ice, you watch how they train off the ice, how they take care of themselves. That all comes into play. And once you get to a certain level, it's up to you. The onus is on you to be the player that you can be. Now, and then I talk about, when I talk to certain kids, and some kids are not as talented as others, but they're just as valuable in the sense. So when I use the analogy of an orchestra, because my old coach used to make this analogy. Well, the violin may not be as attractive as a guitar or as the trumpet, let's say. But without the violin, you're not getting the same effect from the trumpet. If you want to be a violin player, if you want to be a trumpet player, but you're really a violin player, then you have to go to some other orchestra. If you want this orchestra to work, you have to do what you can do best. And I think nowadays, the kids, when they get to a certain age, and I'm going to say 13 or 14, most of those kids, they've identified themselves as players, or they think they know what they are. So I say, if you're, like you mentioned earlier, David, about not having the puck on your, like moving the puck, whatever, but it's not flashy, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So if you're a defenseman who's a puck mover, and all he does is move the puck, well, it's not as flashy as a guy who goes end to end and beats three guys and scores a highlight reel goal. But if you don't have that guy who moves the puck, you're not going to win many games. So this is what I tell young kids. When you get to a certain spot in your life, and 13 is, I think, the age where these kids start to recognize it, be the player that you can be and be really good at it. You have to be the best at moving the puck right away. And then you work on stuff that you need to work on other than that. But your bread and butter is being that player. You've identified yourself. You cannot be that guy that goes end to end. If you're going to try and be that guy, again, you have to go to a different orchestra.
Right.
You have to be the best guy who's going to move the puck right away. If you're going to be the guy that's going to go in and forecheck and cause havoc and be an energy guy, well, you have to be the best energy guy on your team in order to keep that job. If you want to be the goal scorer, you can't play on my team. You got to tell these kids, okay, you've identified what you are. I believe this is what you are. Not saying you can't do other stuff, because you can always work on that stuff. But if you're going to play at the highest level, you got to be true to yourself and be the player that you are.
Agreed, 100%. Great advice right there for any level of player.
Any sport.
Any sport, any level of player. Yeah. Awesome. Well, listen, Gates, we're going to start wrapping this up. I want to just keep this last conversation very quick. This is the Rock and Hockey Show, so I want to talk just quickly about your musical interests and how it impacts you nowadays, but even when you were playing, because I know back in the 70s and 80s, music wasn't a big part of training and inspiration like it is now. Go.
Well, again, I'm an 80s guy, obviously, and my go-to guy is Billy Joel. I love Billy Joel, like the song. Anyways, but when I think of my playing days, and in Europe they had funky music, whatever, but there's two songs that no matter where they come on the radio or on a show or on my iPad or whatever it is, they remind me of my playing days. Actually, there's three, but the two main ones are Jump, Van Halen.
Wow, yeah.
And Freeze Frame, Jay Giles Band.
Jay Giles Band.
So, that's so funny, because I was about to say, like, the Amherst have always been super awesome. at like music, and so I've been going. Dave obviously wasn't around. I've been going to Amber games mid '80s when you guys won Calder Cups, and they always were so great at having current music and all that. They still play Freeze Frame. Like that's
awesome.
that still is their. I'm pretty sure that's still their power play song.
Freeze Frame.
Yeah, and it's like, and I'm sitting there going like this, going, there might be only 3 people in this whole building that knows what this song is, except for at an Amherst game. And it's
it's funny. RJ, it's funny you mentioned that because every time I hear it, I start singing it, and I make people like, why do you know this song?
and I don't know if they played it back when you were still there. Cotton Eye Joe. They play that song. Oh, they play that constantly now. So, real quick, Dave. The quick one I have is Dave and I run into an old buddy of yours. Well, hopefully buddy, but teammate, Jody Gage, all the time. So his son was actually runs the organization that plays out of the rink now. He's one of the
Ryan.
Ryan. Yeah. So we actually got. We got into this giant text message with Ryan about equipment the other day. So we're going to have him on shortly to discuss it because obviously he has the experience of where his dad had it down to him playing and, now him coaching all of his kids and everything like that. So we talk to Jody and Ryan all the time.
Great family.
Actually, I do lessons with their kid, with the kids now, with Ryan's kids.
Oh, with Jody's grandkids? That's funny. That's awesome. Yeah, great family.
But you mentioned leader, having a great leader. I was like, well, that was a Calder Cup team right there, and Jody was the captain. I go, let's, so.
Yeah, and again, the one other song I'm going to say is funny because I had never heard of it until I played there. It was Saber Dance.
See that? I don't know if they play that much anymore.
Saber Dance. Wow. All right.
That's great. Dave and I talk about this all the time. Music is so different nowadays compared to what it was. And we talk about how country now is a lot like what 80s band was back then. Like they're kind of getting into those big ballads and stuff like that. And I go, so everything, the music just changes, but it comes back again. He's obviously a big 80s rock guy.
80s rock. Van Halen. That's me, man. Van Halen.
There you go. And I tell you, even these kids nowadays, like one of the most important jobs of a player on a certain team is the guy that runs the music.
Oh yeah,
we talk about that all the time.
Yes, music is such a big inspiration for people and brings people together. So that's why we talk about it on the show. It's a big part of it. So listen, Gates, we'll wrap it up. I appreciate so much you coming on the show. It's great to see you. If you're ever in Rochester, give me a shout. It'd be great to see you again.
Sounds good, guys. Great spending time with you. And yeah, if I get back in Rochester, I'll give you a ring.
Check out Trotta. It rocks, just like the Rockin' Hockey Show.
I'm Kaden. And I'm Tommy. And this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
The skill development session brought to you by our good friends at Pirani's Hockey World.
Hey, rockers and hockers, summertime is a great time to practice hockey from home. You don't need to be at the rink to work on your striding, your shooting, your puck skills, balance board, leg strength, foot speed, and explosive movement. Set up shop anywhere and get rocking.
My name's Aiden Johnson. I play for the Rochester Junior Americans, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
What do you think this is?
Dad, can I have $2 for a Gatorade?
Just a minute. Next. Time.
Dave Church on the Rockin' Hockey Show. Dave Church from Detroit, Michigan. Churchie, how are you, buddy?
You know, living the dream.
Here's on the show for anybody tuning in. It's been a couple of shows since he's been on, but he comes on and gives us a scoop from what's happening with all Detroit teams and his insight. Former Division I goaltender, but two points of topic today, and you can talk about either one or combine them. 2 shows ago, we talked with legendary coach Barry Smith. Awesome interview. We just got off the phone off the Zoom with Gates Orlando, longtime pro player, over 20-year NHL scout. The conversation was about confidence, but it was also about the skill of today's player versus the skills of yesterday's player. Ready, set, go.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I've spent a lot of time watching USHL games, you know, and it's amazing how much better these kids are at 16 than we were. I mean, it's just amazing. It's night or day. You know, but and then you just go, okay. Then you look at the 15-year-olds. You go all the way back down to when they start skating, and that's what it's all about. These guys are skating better at much earlier ages than we ever were. Right. And there's so much more resources out there. The coaching talent pool for amateur hockey is as good as it's ever been. Right. So that just translates into these kids developing at much younger ages. And so by the time they hit 16, that's why guys are committing to D1 schools at 16 now, which never happened when we were in school. Right. So, so those are my thoughts there. Confidence, though, is, that can be a game changer. I mean, we just talked about Jared Goff, right? He throws 5 picks on the road, and, they interview him after the game, and his confidence is not broken. He said, I'm going to come right back and just keep doing it. And that's a learned behavior, right? As a goalie, you need to not worry about what happened, and you need to focus on what is going to happen, and that's all about confidence. Because you guys have all seen it. When somebody loses their confidence, they're doing nobody, including themselves, any good. And this notion about, think about it as a goaltender, you get pulled out of a game not because of your performance necessarily, but because the team's laying an egg, right? And how would a center take it if he got pulled because the guys around him weren't pulling their weight? And think about that, because that never happens, right? It's always it's like a coach getting fired because the team's playing bad.
Well, that's what I was telling Dave. Dave didn't even know Montgomery got fired, and I'm like, yeah, they're 8-9, but you're the Bruins, you can't. So, yeah. But on the goalie thing, I had a young goalie and kind of more new to hockey parents one time come into the pro shop, and they're asking about goalie lessons and that kind of stuff. So back then I gave him Dave's number and everything, but I told him, I said, listen, you just got to be confident back there, and remember a couple things. One, if you get scored on a power play goal, if you didn't take the penalty, then somebody else screwed up. Not your fault. If you get scored on shorthanded, the power play unit screwed up. They shouldn't be down here. If it's a 2-on-1, that ain't your fault. Somebody else screwed up. I go, right. So I go, you got to just keep your focus and make sure you do what you do. And that's the thing is, like, these young kids are, they get they beat themselves up. Like, and that's where I see it a lot is there's kids all the time that'll just beat themselves up. And you got to remember, it's a game.
Well, on that note, and I'll talk about what Gates was talking about earlier is, this is not a knock on youth coaches, but coaches don't give players enough opportunity to correct a mistake or be creative and learn so that they can have that confidence. It's very rigid on, well, you can't make that play, don't do it again because you screwed it up. And then it's over with. And now that player is afraid to go to the center of the ice, which we were talking about with Gates is, players need to have the room to make mistakes and then recover from them. A perfect example, Justin Verlander. He gives all his credit to Jim Leland for allowing him when he was younger in his career to continue pitching and be able to come back and recover from your mistakes, which made him a Hall of Fame pitcher. So my point is, coaches and parents need to learn how to have a little leeway with their kid. When they make a mistake, they need to have time to recover or to correct that mistake.
Yeah, because it's especially in the youth sports, the coaches are that's a fine detail that probably is just now coming to light. But one of the reasons why I think all kids should be involved in some kind of sport or some kind of an activity is so that they can understand how to overcome adversity, right? And that's what helps build confidence. Because in real life, you're going to be faced with challenges all the time. Things aren't always going to go the right way. So you need to be able to take a negative experience and turn it into a positive experience. And sports is a great way of doing that in a safe manner. So the worst thing you can do is put a fear into the kid. You can't be afraid to make a mistake, right? I mean, we all played at a high level. A mental mistake is a physical mistake is fine. You made a bad pass. I let in a goal. Boom. But it's the mental mistakes that you want to try to minimize. And that's all about confidence, right? I mean, throwing a pass, a high risk pass, well, you might have to do it. Right. And you never have to not have practice doing that. Right. So you want it to be repetitive and so forth. But I do think that coaches are a lot better at recognizing. I have a personal friend whose son plays on the USHL team, and the college team that he committed to, the coaches happened to be in town and they watched him play a playoff game. Had his worst game of the year. In front of the guys that he's going to be playing for in a couple of years, right? So he was down and out. And I was talking to his dad after the game. I said, well, the coaches are going to stay because they want to see how he reacts to this.
Right.
And he reacted well. And then his confidence soared because he knew, okay, I didn't have my best game, but I recovered. And that's uber important, obviously. To David's point, the coaches got to give kids an opportunity to learn how to bounce back.
And a lot of
it's not necessarily intuitive. The other thing about confidence that's infectious is that if in a goaltending context, if I'm standing on my head, the team feels a lot better, right? How much better does a team play when they have confidence in their goalie versus how tentative do they play when they don't? So the opposite is equally true, right?
100%.
And that's the position that we know in hockey. But I mean, how confident do you think that the Lions receivers are because Jared Goff doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, right? How confident do you think the offense is that they know they're going to go for it on fourth down?
Right.
I mean, that's all stuff that has built up because people are confident. I can't believe I'm about to say this. How confident are Detroit Lions fans that our guy can hit a 58-yard field goal? Right?
I mean, well, that's the funniest part is confidence is just, it's so scary, but it's so hard to explain. I get out on the ice and there's times where I know for a fact I shouldn't be out on the ice at this point in time and stuff like that, even though it's men's league. But I want to be able to do that. So, and that's just my confidence out there because I never played like you guys did. And it's like Dave's saying, it's very comes and goes, and it could come and go in the middle of the game. You might make a good pass, and all of a sudden you're like, hell, I could do that all the time. But
that's true. It is. It does. I don't want to say it comes and goes like the wind blows, but it can't. My golf game, I can shoot a 40 or I can shoot a 50, and it feels exactly the same to me, right? How did I make an 18-foot putt and I missed a 2-foot putt? How does that happen?
All right, Churchie, it's been a slice of heaven. Great to have you back on the show, buddy. Good to see you.
Yep, you guys go Lions.
Go Lions.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Beato right here in the Rockin' Hockey Lair.
Hi, this is Gates Orlando, and this is the Rockin' Hockey Show.
This is the Rockin' Hockey Show.